Hello and welcome everyone back to our Sundays Secular Buddhist Essential classes. My name is Venerable Tarpa, and I am thrilled to be here once again on a beautiful Sunday. We are working through our text, Secular Buddhist Essentials, and we're on part two of the text these days, which is about the main topics that the Buddha taught. And we started this section, and it's about our true nature. So we decided to start this teachings talking about the subject, which is us, getting to know who we are, and then we're gonna start branching out to the nature of practice and awakening. Today's topic is the nature of mind. And I do have to say that this today's class is a little out of place because I decided that the nature of mind I should have taught a little earlier in the outline. We've had a lot of questions that have come up because I didn't do so. So we're teaching it now, but it's actually going to belong a little earlier in the sequence. It's going to be like lesson 23, where right now this is lesson 27. So today's class is the nature of mind. So why don't we begin with the textbook presentation of it? The mind is by far the most important focus within Buddhism, being seen as the quintessential element behind our lives and our awakening. Some even go as far as referring to Buddhism as a psychological religion because of its unique focus on gaining mastery over the mind. But before we get into our exploration, let's first try to make some sense of the often confusing hierarchy of terms of the subject. Um, Confusion comes from unique and often over usage of various terms by the different traditions. For example, the term mind is broadly and commonly used for any mental event, including perceptions, cognition, conceptualization, thought, decisions, reactions, etc. And according to this broad definition, there can be dozens of types of mind. In fact, in the Theravada tradition, there's depending on the school, there can be anywhere from 89 to like 118 distinct minds. As you can imagine, that becomes a bit complicated. So, for the sake of clarity, I'd like to offer a sensible hierarchy of common terminology that simplifies and clarifies these terms related to mind. So, the first term is mind. So, if as we learned before in the five aggregates, the teachings of the aggregates, the Buddha asserts that what makes up the sentient creatures that we are two aspects, right? And they're the body and mind, the physical body of us and mind. So again, we use mind here as that broad, in that broad context. The most mind is the most encompassing term for our stream of consciousness or experience that flows moment to moment and life to life. Synonymous with mental continuum, mental stream, or stream of consciousness, mind is a term that encompasses all conscious and subconscious mental experience, states, functions, and processes. So I think that that's a pretty straightforward definition. Now, with SBT, I've decided that we only use mind in that context. We in the West when we talk about the mind, we brain, mind, and cognitive functions. We have different words for all of the different applications. Sadly, in Buddhism, they don't. So it becomes quite confusing. So this is where I'm relying a little bit on our Western our Western knowledge to help out a little bit. And a lot of these terms are common for us, right? So they're not going to seem alien at all to you. So we just define mind. The next term is mind moments. According to Buddhism, although the mind, our mental continuum, appears to be a continuous flowing stream of consciousness, it's actually made up of a multitude of transitory mind moments, similar to the way a film reel is made up of many still photos, and when played rapidly, creates a seemingly continuous stream of motion. In the Buddhist model, each each mind moment, either conscious or subconscious, although lasting only a fraction of a second, inherents, preserves, and transmits the entirety of its knowledge, understanding, and experience. Then, before passing away, it transmits its entire recorded impression to its immediate successor, creating a sense of continuous streams of consciousness extending across time and across lives. As a secular Buddhist group, some of us have entertain belief in rebirth, and some of us don't. Um, I teach rebirth in our classes because Buddhism does believe in it. The Buddha believed in it as well. That doesn't mean you have to, but it would be incorrect for me to share the Dharma just ignoring this huge aspect of Buddhism. So we teach it, but we don't ask you to believe in it if you don't care to. Um, so what's interesting is when we talked about that these mind moments is similar to a film reel, they say that very in-depth meditators can actually start to experience the moments of consciousness like that film reel. Quite interesting. Now we're on to the topic of consciousness. All experience begins with consciousness, which is the bare knowing of an object. Consciousness is the illuminating light of awareness, which illuminates or reveals the world around us. Just as a lamp illuminates and reveals the objects within a dark room, consciousness reveals the sights, sounds, and sensations that make up our world. Without consciousness, experience would not exist. Operating as an impersonal function of the mind, consciousness arises automatically and spontaneously through the meeting of a sense organ and its object, including the mental sense. So Buddhism posits six senses, right? The mind sense, which are eye, ear, nose, tactile, and the mind sense being the last one. And so we say mind sense. What is that sensing? It's sensing our internal environment. It's the sensing of an idea, a thought, a sensation, an emotion, right? Uh, Thereby making experience possible. Because of its foundational importance, it's represented as one of its own distinct aggregates. It's the fifth of the five aggregates. Our next topic is, or term, is mental factors. So we'll often talk about mind and mental factors. The mental factors are 52 unique mental processes or characteristics of the mind that arise alongside of consciousness, and they're intertwined and perform specific functions of perception and thought. Mental factors are what give the tone or flavor to our conscious experience. Some important mental factors are wisdom, feeling, intention, attention, mindfulness, faith, kindness, equanimity, craving, aversion, pride, ignorance, and doubt, just to name a few. Our next term is awareness, often referring to several different technical terms. including as a synonym for consciousness itself. Uh, to create clarity, we'll be defining the term awareness as a specific type of mindful consciousness, meaning where consciousness is the bare knowing or sensing of an object, which occurs automatically and spontaneously. Awareness arises as a combination of consciousness and mental factors. Consciousness never arises alone, which produce a more refined and deliberate knowing or sensing, a knowing that possesses the quality of clarity, presence, and watchfulness, allowing us to understand our experience fully, including the quality of our experiences. Awakening is often described as deliberate, lucid awareness, possessing the qualities of metacognition, which is being aware of the workings of the mind, as well as introspection, being aware of the content of the mind. Thereby, this thereby works as a lens with which, along with wisdom, I'm sorry, one second, which along with wisdom allows us to properly discern the true nature of things. Awareness expresses itself in two distinct ways, that of focus awareness and peripheral awareness. Focus awareness is our active awareness, possessing a strong, narrow focus, allowing us to concentrate clearly and deeply on a specific object, task, or detail. Whereas peripheral awareness is our background passive awareness, a more expansive and experiential knowing, experienced more as being and feeling and experiencing. These two forms of awareness operate together in harmony. What we deem important is taken up by focused awareness, while our peripheral awareness monitors our general internal and external environments. Any questions so far? Should I be stopping after each term to give you guys a chance to ask questions? Yes, please, Kat.
May have completely misunderstood, but is awareness that which knows consciousness? Like, does it illuminate consciousness? Is awareness, or is it's not this or that? I'm trying to put it into it's this
Consciousness
or it's that. Yeah.
Consciousness illuminates our world, just like if we turn on a lamp. Without consciousness, our own personal reality would be empty, right? Consciousness illuminates things and allows the knowing of things around us within our minds. But awareness is a specific type of consciousness, and it's a consciousness that is combined with mental factors. Uh, and these mental factors are mindfulness is one, right? So it's not where consciousness is just bare knowing, right? And this happens on such a basic level that this happens even before you're aware of it. If you could imagine opening a door and just opening a house door, even before you're looking around and naming objects, you've already illuminated the room. You're already aware of the bare phenomena that's there. That's consciousness, right? Impersonal, it's just aware of objects, right? Where awareness has these mental functions, factors that bring life to it, right? There's wisdom is one of the mental functions, mindfulness. So it's not a bare consciousness. This is where some real understanding of those things is, right? And including the mind focusing on certain objects. You open that door to the house, you open it up, you look, and your eye naturally will stop on certain objects and you'll be aware of those individually. That's your focused awareness. While at the same time, your peripheral awareness is aware of yourself standing there, your experience of being in the room. Does that help?
Thank you very much. I was just wondering if awareness it's to do with like subject object contact, or is awareness kind of outside of that type of thing?
No, I think both consciousness and that are both aware of that. The idea, even though consciousness is a bare awareness, it's still it's related to you experiencing the objective world, right? But there's not a lot of wisdom going on yet. So the discernment isn't there, but it's clearly operating through that. The subject awareness can come in and be mindful of that and understand that at a much deeper level. But just remember that awareness is uh, well, let's be careful. Awareness is the combination of consciousness and mental functions. Consciousness is that raw knowing. Mental factors. Let me get my terminology right. Is a lot of the mental cognitive abilities that go along with that. Higher understanding, higher cognition, wisdom, uh, mindfulness, belief, faith, all these things. It's that what flavors that consciousness. It's what gives our lives content and texture. Yeah. Oh, Miss Huamo, please.
Sorry about that.
Sure.
So, is your stance that mind is just brain activity?
No, mind is the broadest category, terminology for anything having to do with cognition, mind, consciousness, awareness. It's just the biggest term, right? You as a sentient being are made up of two things, mind and body. Anything having to do with mental activity is underneath that umbrella term of mind.
Okay.
Now, this is the way it's used in Buddhism, even in strict Theravada Buddhism. But then they'll also use the word mind for subcategories, which makes it really confusing. They'll use the word mind or chitta for mental states. And there's, at least three or four different technical terms that use that same word, where in English, we just use different words. We say mind, mental factors, consciousness, awareness. So I'm
Hmm.
I'm trying to bring that in to bring some clarity.
Okay, because so you consider its brain is part of the body and the mind is a separate thing from that, right?
We're going to get to that in a second.
Thank you.
Yeah. But right now we're trying to talk about the mind and what fits inside there, right? Okay, good questions today. Okay, I'll move on. Let me figure out where I was. Okay, the next term is the subconscious. And this was by far the hardest one for me to come to terms with, considering that the numerous Buddhist perspectives on the subconscious vary drastically across different traditions. To formulate a sensible SBT presentation turned out to be quite challenging from Theravada perspectives that see the subconscious with the primary duty of maintaining continuity of our mental continuum as an undercurrent or reservoir of potentialities and tendencies that powerfully influence and condition our lives, to Mahayana presentations that are more aligned with modern views. It's at times like this that I follow the Dalai Lama's advice, which he says that if scientific evidence is clear, even if it contradicts Buddhism, we go with the science. So, with that said, I'd like to offer a perspective that integrates the various Buddhist views with modern neuroscience models into a somewhat comprehensive, hopefully comprehensive, and useful presentation. So, the subconscious, according to the Mahayana and neuroscience, although sentient beings possess one mind, our minds have different levels or expressions of that single stream of experience. There is the obvious conscious mind, but there are also subconscious and unconscious levels of mind that operate below the surface of our conscious mind. Our subconscious is referred to as the passive mind in Buddhism, and is understood not as a static reservoir, but as a dynamic hub of mental functions and processes, a breeding place of potentials and tendencies, which spawn ideas, intentions, intuition, desire, impulses, emotions, sensations, memories, etc. Most conscious mental content begins in the subconscious, where it's shaped and conditioned. Then, when causes and conditions are appropriate, that content is transmitted to the conscious mind, appearing as new intentions, thoughts, ideas, and impressions. Although they appear to spring up spontaneously in the conscious mind, the content is extensively processed and deliberated on by the subconscious. Through contemplative practice, we can slowly gain greater and greater access to the subconscious. This in turn gives us greater and greater control and mastery over ourselves, our lives, and our awakening. So I've heard so many presentations of the subconscious. It was a deeply difficult piece to write, but I think I came up with something that's useful for us. How the mind works. So now that we're done with some terminology, I'm going to give a little presentation here. Today, evidence points to the brain as the physical organ of cognition, which I don't believe is in dispute, while the mind is understood as the mental process or product that arises from the brain. However, Buddhism, while acknowledging the brain as a major factor in the function of the mind, asserts that the brain does not create the mind. Instead, Buddhism asserts that the mind exists throughout the body, often believing it to be centered at the heart or chest. Again, according to Buddhism, the mind is our stream of consciousness and experience that flows from moment to moment and life to life. Synonyms with mental continuum, synonyms for mind are mental continuum, mental stream or stream of consciousness. Mind is a term that encompasses all conscious and subconscious mental experience, states, and processes. According to the Buddha's model of mind, although the mind appears to be a continuous flowing stream of consciousness, it's actually made up of a multitude of transitory mind moments, similar to the way a film reel is made up of many still photos, but when played rapidly, creates a seemingly continuous stream of motion. In the same way, I didn't realize that I actually presented this twice. In the same way, each mind moment, either conscious or subconscious, lasts only a fraction of a second, but before passing away, it transmits its entire recorded impressions to its immediate successor, creating a sense of continuous stream of consciousness extending across time and across lives. Thank you. Commonly, most of us see our minds as similar to kings and queens that orchestrate our lives. But according to Buddhism, this is an illusion. Our minds are not monarchs presiding over their kingdoms. Instead, our minds are more like communes, existing as a shared dynamic process, lacking any central authority or ownership, meaning the mind is not directed by a single entity, but instead is an assemblage of mental factors where each is responsible for their own specific functions, but share the mutual aim of the flourishing of the whole. This inevitably leads to the next question. What about the self? So again, this piece is a little out of context because it's supposed to come right after the five aggregates, and it's supposed to go right into what we learned already about the nature of self. So what do you guys think about that short piece on how the mind works? Did it answer your questions, Wangmo?
It did, but what's fascinating is that he would come up with that moment to moment view. Like you said, you can say like a camera, but they didn't even have those then. Do you know what I mean? Isn't that fascinating to have that image of moment to moment at a time when he didn't even have that reference point?
Yeah, how could they understand it without that example?
Yeah, that's fascinating.
But isn't it fascinating that they'll say that very strong meditators can actually start to sense moment to moment transition like that? Like it becomes clear to a meditator. But they talk
Wow.
about those moments being so short. Tibetans talk about a moment being 60 moments in the blink of an eye. And I think Theravada goes even further. There's like hundreds. But it is quite fascinating, yeah. And so that's how our mind operates, just these little snapshots. And so I remember teaching a while back on introspection and the idea of, you know, how can we watch ourselves? And the idea there is that you're actually you're actually looking at a snapshot of yourself from a moment ago. That's how introspection works. That's how you're able to watch what you're doing. That they're not both happening at the same time. There's a split second difference there, and you're looking at a snapshot from a moment ago. I think the mind is fascinating. Yeah, David, please.
Um, Fascinating, absolutely fascinating. I've never heard you explain it so clearly. One factor, though, that I don't understand is that all the things that you've mentioned, whether it's the mental factors or the awareness, subconscious, conscious, all are functions of the brain. Where does the body come into that? They're all functions of the brain, as far as I can see.
So today we haven't been talking about the body, but clearly the brain is a part of the body. That's the physical aspect. And then mine is the mental aspect that arises from the brain. Now, Buddhism denies that. Even Bhikkhu Bodhi, who he doesn't believe. Actually, they believe that the mind is the creator of the body through rebirth. That this continuum, this mental continuum that is reborn, that continues on through rebirths, is the source of the physical world around us. That's the very strict traditional interpretation. Even the world and the universe, they believe, is created by sentient beings' consciousness. So fascinating, isn't it?
But that would mean, if I understand correctly, that would mean that the brain is the container of the mind, if you want. And I still don't see how the body would fit into that model.
Well, the brain's part of the body, right?
Oh, okay. If you're going to take that, if is there any part of the body apart from the brain that is foundational in the mind?
Buddhism doesn't further their explanation on that, but I would say the central nervous system is a huge part. The senses throughout the body, the organs, uh, the each one of our sense organs is uh, is used to create consciousness. Consciousness arises from a sense organ meeting an object. So your eye meeting an object on the table, that creates eye consciousness. And then the ear creates ear consciousness. So yes, the whole body is involved in it.
But those things don't mean anything until the signal hits the brain.
Well, they're interpreted by the brain. So Buddhism would say that again. Remember, we described consciousness as raw knowing. So when the eyeball meets that object on the table, it's the rawest of knowing. It just sees the object, right? Then mental factors come in. Like if you think about the five aggregates, remember we have a couple that come up as feeling comes up, right? How do we feel about that object? Perception comes up, which looks at more detail about the object. Volition comes up into possibly what choices we'll have with that object. So again, consciousness is that raw knowing, right? And that raw knowing is mind. That's mind at its most raw state, right? Where
But all those,
mental factors come in and they add the nuance to it.
Mm.
So I would say the whole body is involved with the mind, let alone that the circulatory system produces nutrients for all the organs, the brain itself. So they're all connected. So I think Buddhism says that it talks about a mind and body, but they're also talking about them being completely intertwined. Buddhism ultimately doesn't see a difference between that. Buddhism doesn't have a problem with that hard question they often call it, the mind body question. How does mentality come from a physical entity? Buddhism believes that any separation between mind and body we only do for analysis. They're completely intertwined.
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Miss Wamo.
Yeah, Tarpa, are you going to talk at all about our ability to control our minds and also the importance it has in the process of awakening, or are you going to do that when you talk about awakening?
I have one last little piece where I'll say, why is this important to us? But a lot of the things you mentioned are going to be in a future chapter, which is entitled How We Interact with Our Environment. Right
Okay.
now, we're setting the stage. We're talking about the subject ourselves. Next, we're going to talk about phenomena. Then, we're going to start talking about how we interact with that. And how we use this information is like the Four Noble Truths, right? All the
Mhm.
Buddhist practices. In karma, we did already. We talked about the purification process through ethical, intentional volition, if you remember. So yeah, we kind of tease at that, and we kind of are continuously poking at it. Remember that today's class is actually going to be a pretty early one in this chapter. Miss Lisa, please share. You're on Dana's phone. You need help unmuting? Is that helpful? Do you know sign language? Well, while Lisa works on that, does anyone else have any questions?
Jose does, and there's something in the chat if you want to take Jose first.
Oh, Jose, please.
Yes, I'm having a hard time grasping the subtle difference between consciousness and awareness. You said that consciousness was raw knowing, but to me that kind of sounds synonymous with awareness. What am I missing? What is the subtle difference? Because I'm not grasping that.
Well, one of them is we're using it in a distinct way. So yes, consciousness is bare knowing, right? Or sensing. But awareness is consciousness, but it's also mental factors, right? Mental factors brings the personal nuance to that raw awareness, raw consciousness, right? And so some of the mental factors were wisdom and mindfulness and intuition and thought and desire. All of that personal kind of uh, process is contained in the mental factors. There's an old saying, I think it was my first book that talks about um, we think about the mind as being in charge of everything, but it's really your mental factors that you're dealing with in your life. Your life really is much more about your mental factors. So, consciousness is just bare knowing, where awareness brings in that subtlety, that nuance, and enhances, refines that knowing. It brings in perception, discrimination. It's not just an apple on the table. It's a golden, delicious apple from Illinois. Yeah, so it brings life to it, right? Where consciousness is just as bare as it gets, no discernment. Yeah. And what's the other we talked about it being uh conscious mindful awareness, a mindful discerning awareness. So, and that's what you're using right now. All these words you're hearing, you're able to process these. Your raw consciousness just sees the screen, right? Everything you're taking in is going through the mental factors. So the mental factors is what makes awareness unique. Your experience of life is the mental factors. But consciousness never arises by itself because the mental factors are the qualities of that consciousness.
I think Lisa's ready.
Lisa, are you ready?
I am.
Ah,
So when you were talking about the brain as being sort of separate from the body, but there's a huge connection with the gut and the brain. There are a
well,
whole
let me rephrase that for you.
yeah,
We were saying that the brain is part of the body. So
right.
there's the physical, which is the brain, the body, the organs, and all of that. But you're right. We have that gut bacteria, gut. What do they call it?
The biome, the microbiome, but there's also a bunch of neurotransmitters in the gut.
That's right. Yeah, gut neurons. And so now that gives more credibility to the Buddhist take that the mind isn't generated by the brain, but exists throughout the body. And then there's hypotheses that say that every cell in the body has some kind of neuro ability to transmit neurons. So you're right. It's fascinating.
But I
Thank you.
can read Ricky's comment for you. He said, "What about the minds of he said animals, but other sentient beings?"
And that's Patrick's.
I'm
Patrick's
sorry.
he's always interested in our four-legged friends. Patrick, when we're talking about this in minds, we're talking about sentient beings. So we're talking about humans, animals, insects. How far does it go? There really isn't an answer. Some would say, the definition of a sentient life can be as down as like single cell organisms that have the ability to move towards light and food and away from darkness and danger. So it's they're really that point of what's considered sentient is undefined. But when we say sentient life, we're saying all of us sentient life operates in this way. Some would say sentient life is defined by that which has a brain.
Mhm.
Now, of course, ours is much more nuanced detailed than other animals, but all animals work in the same way.
Yeah.
Clearly, all animals have fear.
Yeah.
Animals have wisdom,
Hmm.
discernment, right? All of those qualities.
Yeah.
Bodies, brains.
Yeah, so as humans, our mental factors might be more complex
Very
than
much so.
yeah. Thank you.
What'd you forget? Oh, sorry. I'm so sorry. I thought I was muted.
Oh, great question. Yeah, so and the last piece I have here is our great ending pieces for all of the for every chapter is how does this benefit my life, Tenzin Tarpa? You've been going on and on for an hour. And I would say, simply put, learning about understanding and mastering our minds is the first step in understanding and mastering our lives, our happiness, and our awakening. It's very simple, isn't it? Your mind is the biggest factor in your life, no doubt about it, right? So you master it, you're doing pretty good. If you don't, and your mind just habitually drags you all over the place and drags you from desire to drive, that's a pretty chaotic life. Where when we learn to gain some control over that, and we can become more principled, more moral, more ethical, and skillful, life improves. It's that simple. So life is responsible for your happiness and suffering, and we call that awakening. Oh, a nice short class. Took me forever to write it. So I hope everybody enjoyed it. Next week, we are going to be talking about rebirth. And it's going to be one of the last topics of this section of the text. So I will post the recording and the text of this material on our social media. What else is going on? Tomorrow we have one of our last mind training classes with Tenzin Karma at 1900 UTC. These days we are working on the six perfections, and tomorrow's class is on developing supreme concentration. This is going to be class 5 of our 6-week program. So we're just winding up for that. I wanted to thank everybody for coming. I had a blast teaching this to everybody. Why don't we end today's teaching with our altruistic affirmation? May all be healthy. May all be prosperous. May all be well. May all be present, free of past regret and future worry. May all abide in constant appreciation, which is the source of great joy and contentment. May all realize their true nature and the true nature of reality, which is awakening. Thanks for coming. Thank you for your excellent questions. We'll see you tomorrow during our classes. Bye-bye, friends.
Bye-bye. Thank you, Venerable Tarpa.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Venerable Tarpa.